Throughout the late 90s and early noughties, Harry Potter fever had begun taking over the entire world. Nowhere was safe. The books have been translated into at least 88 languages, including Braille, and the movies have made over $7.7 billion combined. And in the middle of all that was me, the most annoying little Harry Potter obsessed kid in town. I had the knowledge, I had the merch, I'd seen the movies enough times that I could probably write the entire screenplays for the first 5 out for you right now. I was that kid where if someone said something slightly incorrect about the series, I'd kind of slide in there like, well... And of course, as inevitable as it was, you bet I played the video games. I played the PS1 adaptation of The Philosopher's Stone so much that Jeremy Soul's soundtrack is just as iconic to me as the John Williams score from the movies. The Goblet of Fire video game was the reason I upgraded to the PS2 because I played it over a friend's house co-op style and was hooked. I was so adamant that I wanted the Half-Blood Prince tie-in for Christmas that my poor mother went out and bought it twice because she was worried that she might have forgotten. So I remember playing The Order of the Phoenix, my favourite Potter game at the time, running around Hogwarts as Harry and thinking, man, wouldn't it be cool if you could create your own wizard and just go to school here? I don't need to take down the Dark Lord or cause a rebellious uprising, I just want to live here in Hogwarts. And clearly I wasn't alone in that sentiment, since the world collectively lost its mind when Hogwarts Legacy was announced in September of 2020. It was exactly that. A brand new experience where we could explore the world that we loved so much and just live in it as our very own witch or wizard. Now, after the several delays, I was beginning to worry, but after playing through the thing, I was so very pleasantly surprised by just how good it is. So without any further ado, let's sit back and try to understand the magic of Hogwarts Legacy. Before we get fully into the breakdown of the game, I do quickly want to touch upon the surrounding backlash of the title. If you're not interested in this stuff and want to jump straight into the meat of the video, then feel free to skip to the timestamp on screen now. So in case you've been living under a rock, for the last few years, J.K. Rowling has developed the self-destructive habit of not knowing when to shut the fuck up. Aside from spouting pointless, contradictory trivia about the wizarding world, she's also made a few enemies with her very public and controversial views about the trans community. I'm not going to get into why she said what she said or why it's wrong or right because, frankly, it's not my place to do that, but I do want to talk about the boycott. So there is a group of individuals, either members of the LGBTQ+ community or self-described allies, that are taking the moral stance of refusing to buy, play, or even support this game in any way, because it's essentially money straight into Rowling's pocket. Look, I get it. Despite her having no involvement in the project, she still rakes in a lot of cheddar from the IP. So if you want to refrain from buying into all that, I get it. That's your prerogative. But the issue I have is when people then start using this personal agenda inappropriately to either persuade others to share their views or harass those that are just trying to have a good time. One of the writers over at Wired gave the game a 1 out of 10, and having read through the review, it barely feels like they played the thing. Most of the complaints weren't even about the game, but how it isn't the Harry Potter movies, and how J.K. Rowling has ruined her reputation. The few complaints that are made aren't backed up with any real argument, just lazy surface-level insults. And then you have the droves of people that spam hateful messages into people's comments because they're just playing the game. Look, you do whatever you feel is right for your morality and your values, but this is not okay. As Girlfriend Review said, nobody wants to be labelled pro-child labour for tweeting from their iPhone any more than they want to be labelled transphobic for downloading Hogwarts Legacy. We can separate the art from the artist, and in this case, J.K. Rowling isn't even the artist. By boycotting the game, you're not just giving the middle finger to her, but are actively condemning the 500+ employees who work at Avalanche Software and spent several years working on this passion project. I don't want to go on about this much longer, so I'll leave off with this. If you want to play Hogwarts Legacy, then play it. Don't let people ruin it for you. Nobody else has the right to tell you what to buy or what you can or can't enjoy. You're not a bad person because you want to fulfill your childhood dream of roaming and exploring this world. And on that note, let's actually take a look at the thing. So after a couple hours playing through the game and sinking my teeth into the story, I was incredibly impressed with the whole experience. I've been playing video games for a long time now, about 20 years, and I thought to myself while wandering around Hogwarts that I haven't been this invested in a world since The Witcher 3. Last year I played Elden Ring, which was a long-awaited hype train for me, and I personally was way more invested here than I was there. What immediately stood out to me upon being handed the freedom to explore the castle was just how they went around designing the thing. I wasn't sure if they were going for a book-accurate layout of Hogwarts, maybe replicating the design from the movies, or even a completely original map, and honestly, they kind of did all three. It would be impossible to 100% accurately represent the castle from either of the prior formats, since it obviously doesn't actually exist. If you try to recreate a room from one of the movies and you notice a door in the background, you'd have to consider where that door leads, and then doing that for every nook and cranny in the castle would not only be a very arduous task, but likely undoable since no blueprints actually exist. For example, in the books it's implied that the trophy room is around the Forbidden Corridor on the 3rd floor somewhere, where in the movies it seems to be located underneath the Great Hall, but in Hogwarts Legacy it's all the way up here at the top of the Grand Staircase. But if you explore around the back end of the castle, you'll find the Clock Tower courtyard and the rickety wooden bridge introduced in the film version of The Prisoner of Azkaban. Down at the bottom of the castle you can find the Death Day party featured in the books. The whole thing has been painstakingly created to appeal to fans of everything Harry Potter, and it makes for something truly special to be able to explore. The entire castle is so full of life, which you'll instantly notice as you roam around the halls and the corridors. There are moving portraits all over the place that comment on things happening in the world. There's even one particular hallway where each portrait has a musical instrument and they play together in a band. You'll be randomly patrolling the different sections and stumble across ghosts fencing with each other through the walls, or suits of armoured knights smashing each other to pieces for making irritating noises. Students fill the halls and you can overhear them gossiping about other people or complaining that one of the professors has given them too much work. The whole place feels so full of energy, like the castle itself is alive almost. The common rooms are bustling with activity and each have their own specific feel to them, with Gryffindor and Slytherin looking pretty similar to the way they were interpreted for the movies, and the other two having an air of creative freedom, with the development team got to experiment with them a bit. Hufflepuff's is set up like a cozy, botanical cabin, and Ravenclaw's is more of a clean-cut, stone-walled study. And even these visual distinctions vary from time to time as the seasons pass. When you progress through the main story, the seasons come and go, which affect the surrounding areas pretty significantly. In autumn, you'll find the trees browning off and Halloween decorations being strewn around the place, pumpkins and all. Come winter, the world is covered in snow and Christmas trees litter the castle. It really is as if you stepped into the wizarding world that we experienced as kids. It's pretty incredible. People often cite Harry Potter as one of those Christmas movies that you have to watch in December, when in reality, Christmas is barely touched upon in the story. But the two go so hand in hand that it kind of becomes difficult to separate them, and it's really cool that we can experience Hogwarts all year round. We're not even limited to just exploring the castle itself. It was announced before release that we'd be able to explore the nearby village of Hogsmeade, which I wasn't overly excited about since it just contains a few shops and doesn't really have much going on there. But I found that once I immersed myself in the world, Hogsmeade was a really fun place to be. Not only are there fun and interesting shops to look through, but there are wacky and whimsical characters to meet along the way. Hogwarts Legacy has built a seamless world with no loading screens and nearly every door is accessible. If you see a house, shop, hut, cottage or stable, you can likely enter it. Nothing seems to be off limits. You can enter Honeyduke's sweet shop, and although you can't buy anything here, you can still explore and see what would be on offer for students to purchase. I encountered an event where the owner of Zonko's joke shop throws out 2 students for shoplifting, and while they deny stealing anything, fireworks are going off in their pockets. It's so much fun to poke around these nooks and crannies to find something totally unique to this world happening before your very eyes. And after you've had your fill of Hogwarts and Hogsmeade, you can wander around the Highlands, which is basically the rest of the game's open world. Now, despite not having quite the densely populated activity of the school itself, the Highlands is still very rewarding to explore. The issue I tend to have with open world projects that studios like Ubisoft usually churn out is that they tend to be massive sandboxes with not a lot going on in them. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, for instance, has a lot of collectibles, 782 to be exact, but no real incentive to seek them out other than for completionist's sake. There's a reason that most people refuse to collect all the flags in the first game. There's no reward. At least the feathers in AC2 are tied to a quest, but these flags are there purely to artificially extend the player's game time. Games with great open worlds are genuinely a joy to explore, and you want to seek out things like collectibles because the motivation isn't to just gradually tick up an arbitrary counter, but to see what comes next. I can't tell you how many times I've started making my way somewhere in Hogwarts Legacy, only to notice something else on the way and then get distracted. Projects with the best open worlds have you experience something new every 30 seconds or so, where the ones that people tend to lose interest in are massive in scale, but ultimately void of any captivating content. Not only do you want to look for more field guide pages because they always provide interesting bits of lore and have you discovering new areas, but the activities like the Merlin trials actively provide a gameplay benefit by increasing the available gear slots on your person. You explore and find equipment until you run out of inventory space, then explore and complete some Merlin trials, then you can explore again and find even more equipment. The whole gameplay loop is a delicate balance of setting up its own systems, and that's pretty genius game design. The section of the map which seems to have the least collectibles and little distractions is this section northeast of Hogwarts, and that's because this is the area with the best view of the castle. Avalanche clearly knows when to pull your attention and when to leave you be to soak in the atmosphere that they've created. But that's the thing, it's not all atmosphere and pretty lighting. The game is absolutely filled to the brim with these little details that pay off big time if you're a die-hard Potter fan. My brother started playing the game before I did, and he sounded pretty excited when he told me that he'd met a kid called Ominous Gaunt. The name didn't really mean anything to him at the time, other than sounding a little peculiar, but I kind of blew his mind when I told him how the Gaunts were descendants of Voldemort. He said, oh, that makes sense, because he mentioned how he was from the lineage of Salazar Slytherin, but he'd never read the book, so he didn't have that knowledge at the forefront of his mind. The game isn't beating you over the head like, remember this, but instead enriches the experience for players in the know. I love how Professor Binns' class is agonizingly boring as described in the books, but it isn't totally palpable until you've sat at a desk listening to his woefully dull voice and played a minigame to stay awake. Fast travel isn't just warping from one area to another, but is explained via the use of flue powder, which is a nice touch, even if I have to keep listening to Ignatia Wildsmith say,
"You can't imagine how inconvenient travel was before I invented flue powder."
I appreciate the subtle details, like how right at the start of the story, your carriage seems to be pulling itself, but after you witness George get killed by the dragon, the Thestrals appear into view, which I totally missed on my first playthrough. One day I had a wander around the Great Hall and came across a Slytherin student being harassed by a howler, which wasn't something I ever thought I'd see with my own eyes. I was so focused on it that I didn't even notice another kid glitching through the table next to me. I discovered a few references while looking for field guide pages in school and found the portrait of Sir Cadogan, a pretty funny character from the book that was cut from the movies, and even the casket for the Goblet of Fire that looks virtually identical to the same way it does in the film. I went looking for some landmarks myself and searched for the girls' bathroom at the bottom of the grand staircase to see if anything relating to the Chamber of Secrets was there, and lo and behold, here it was. Again, it looks pretty much the same as it did in the film, and one of the taps even has a serpent etched into the metal. This is the kind of stuff that makes the castle feel endlessly explorable. You never quite feel like you've seen it all. And to top the whole thing off, the music. Hogwarts Legacy's soundtrack is so bombastically bouncy in the awe-filled moments and melodically sorrowful during the emotional beats that it's somehow managed to accomplish the best of both worlds. The score has been lovingly crafted to feel new and fresh for this story, but also reminiscent of the music that we know and love from the films. There were several instances where I thought one of John Williams' songs were about to come in, but the game pulled the rug from underneath me and diverted into its own unique thing. It seems like they've pulled a few notes from many of the motifs and tried to tie that into a more primitive interpretation to be suitable for an older story. The game's main theme, Overture to the Unwritten, is itself seemingly composed of many different musical ideas. There's a slow cello at the start that takes inspiration from Arrival of Baby Harry. But when the rest of the orchestra comes in, there are remnants of Hedwig's theme hiding in there. In the House Cup, there's a small piece that's similar to that of Hagrid's Christmas tree. Even the film series' other composers get paid homage as well, with Central Tower having a similar feel to Nicholas Hooper's Loved Ones and Leaving. This all comes together to not only build atmosphere, but to play on your nostalgia of those movies without ever feeling like it's straight up stealing the tracks. It's honestly incredible. But what would your experience in this world be without your own witch or wizard? Hogwarts Legacy allows the player to fulfill a lifelong dream of creating your very own character to explore the map with. The game is inclusive enough to allow you to choose any combination of face shape, skin tone, hairstyle, and voices, so you can play with feminine features but a masculine cadence. The choice at the end for witch or wizard only really determines which dormitory you belong to, since the castle won't allow you to enter the opposite gender's bedroom area. Once you arrive at Hogwarts, you can choose which house you want to belong to, and a few quests in, you'll be making a trip to Ollivander's where you can customise your own wand by picking the wood texture, the colour, length, pliability, and the core. Through gear found around the world, you can also apply different handles to the wand and customise it further. These choices are purely cosmetic and have no effect on gameplay, but for people who love this universe, that's all we really want, a completely original character with a unique loadout. If you were like me and wanted to accurately replicate what you were dealt on Pottermore, then you can link your Warner Brothers account to the game, and it will make these choices for you. That's such a cool detail that may seem trivial to some, but for the select few, this is everything. It feels as if we've finally been rewarded for our love of the property. And this extends to all of the side characters that you'll meet throughout Hogwarts Legacy. The movies kind of boil each house down to its single defining trait. Gryffindor is where all the rebels go, Ravenclaw is full of bookworms and intellectuals, Hufflepuff is the hanger-oner where no one particularly wants to be, and Slytherin is reserved for the bad guys. This is a critical misunderstanding of what these groups are actually supposed to represent. Now, I don't mean the labels bravery, intelligence, loyalty, cunning. After all, we don't really know how the sorting hat works. For example, Neville is placed into Gryffindor but doesn't truly demonstrate a great sense of nerve or bravery until around book 5. Maybe the hat relies on potential more than what you've already demonstrated. But then you look at Peter Pettigrew, he's defined by being ultimately cowardly, so what was he doing in Gryffindor? Maybe he had the potential to be brave but never truly had the chance to act on it. Or perhaps the hat looks at what traits you value more so than the ones you exhibit. Pettigrew was a coward, but had huge respect for brave people like James and Sirius. Crabbe and Goyle don't strike me as particularly ambitious people, but they follow Draco, who very much does embody those traits. The reason for this massive tangent is that an accurate representation of Hogwarts and these 4 houses shouldn't boil each student down to 1 or 2 basic traits. And to be fair to Hogwarts Legacy, I think it does a great job of humanising these kids and fleshing them out as real people. The first proper Slytherin student I met was Sebastian Sallow, who clearly has a bit of an ego when you duel with him in class, but afterwards he takes his defeat with dignity and seems to be a genuinely nice person. He isn't a cartoonish stereotype of a Slytherin student, he quickly became my best friend at the school. Down by the boathouse you can find Nerida Roberts, another Slytherin student who is super sweet and spends a lot of time alone trying to communicate with merpeople. Conversely, I came across brash Hufflepuffs and snooty Ravenclaws, which goes to show that not only are these people more than their respective house's identifier, but those values can manifest in different forms as well. The teachers play a big part of your time at school too, and each one of them brings their own sense of charm and character to your time at Hogwarts. Once I got over the initial surprise that Hogwarts was far more racially inclusive in the 1800s than it was during the 1990s, I realised that these people have far more depth to them than I initially expected. Professor Ronan had a difficult childhood since he was homeschooled by his very strict father, which played a part in his love for games and extracurricular activities. He attempts to make his lessons far more interactive and fun than simply reading through textbooks. The fact that we get to play Summoner's Court in Charms class is indebted to this man's personal history with learning. Some of their backstories are even interwoven into their movements. Potions Master Professor Sharp reveals a little while into the story that he used to be an Auror and suffered an injury on the job one day, resulted in him leaving the position and taking up teaching at Hogwarts. Despite learning of this a few hours into the game, there are clues to be found beforehand, like the slight limp in his walking animation or the Auror's badge we can find on his desk. Professor Garlick, the herbology teacher, even has an established prior relationship with Sirona, the owner of the Three Broomsticks, who, unless I'm mistaken, is the first transgender character in the franchise. The teacher that I was the least interested in was actually Professor Fig, who typically is the one we spend the most time with. Half of the magic that you experience in Hogwarts doesn't come from students walking up walls or floating in the air because of a magic hat. It comes from interacting with honestly believable characters and people that you want to spend time with and learn more about. Interaction and exploration make up about 50% of your time here, and the other 50% goes to the gameplay. So let's talk about that. So I'd argue that the bread and butter of the gameplay in Hogwarts Legacy is the wand play. Now, if I had to compare the combat here to any other game, I'd say it's sort of a mishmash of God of War 2018, Marvel's Spider-Man, and Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. It has that third-person over-the-shoulder camera perspective with light and heavy attacks, a dodge button, a quick healing animation, and an intuitive block/counter function. Each of these mechanics, however, have been tweaked to fall faithfully into place in this world. The heal button is virtually identical to Fallen Order, but instead of popping a stim pack, you drink some Wiggenweld potion, an addition from the old PS1 and PS2 games that was never mentioned in the books. The light attacks take the form of what the game calls a basic cast, while the heavy attacks are the spells that we're more familiar with. Charms like Expelliarmus or Diffindo can be hotbarred to the controller's face buttons, which allow you to cast these intricate combinations on the fly, which not only looks cool as hell, but can even be used in specific sequences for damage buffs. I've noticed from my time playing that freezing an enemy with Glacius and then blasting them with Confringo or Incendio is incredibly effective at taking them down quickly. Later on, you can unlock a trait that upgrades your standard dodge into a magical dash that turns you into a sort of wispy smoke, similar to that scene at the end of the Order of the Phoenix. You can use Protego to quickly block an incoming attack, or holding the button down instead follows up with Stupefy, which will fire a counter attack towards the person. If you progress through a certain questline, you can even go about learning the 3 unforgivable curses to use whenever you please. Crucio slowly ticks down their health bar over time, Imperio causes them to switch allegiance and they'll fight their own people, and obviously Avada Kedavra just kills them outright, which can save you a lot of time when fighting enemies with huge amounts of HP like trolls and certain boss fights. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be much of a consequence for using these spells openly, but it's pretty cool that we got the choice. I think that what they did was ultimately a better decision than just to leave them out altogether. The combat overall though has a much more intricately balanced design than the series' previous entries. You might remember the combat in the Goblet of Fire being a little spammy and heavily relying on how fast you can mash one button. The same kind of goes for the Half-Blood Prince. The Order of the Phoenix was more carefully paced, but the method of casting spells with the analog stick, while cool, was a little too janky to be fully reliable. Here though, you're sort of free to adapt the pace of an encounter to how you like to play. You can fire basic casts like an M16 if you like, or juggle enemies in mid-air through the use of Levioso, Accio and Depulso. You can even take the stealthy approach and use Petrificus Totalis to paralyze them if that's more your thing. The relationships that the spells have with each other and your ability to bind them as you see fit result in a far more tactical gameplay loop than you may have expected. You have several different potions and magical plants from the universe to use in combat too, if you like to experiment with different strategies. You can use a Mandrake Scream to temporarily stun an enemy, or throw down a huge venomous tentacular that will shoot acid and try to chomp on them. As well as the aforementioned Wiggenweld potion, you can use an invisibility potion to, you guessed it, turn invisible, an Edurus potion to turn your skin into a tough, rocky texture that increases damage absorption, or a focus potion to reduce your cooldown times for spells. I never really used these, I forgot they were there to be honest, but their availability adds far more potential when it comes to trying different tactics. Honestly, I recommend playing through the thing on hard difficulty if you think you're up to it, just because it felt far more immersive since we're playing as a 15-year-old student. I know that we have this rare ability to use ancient magic, but dragging the fights out a little longer and having you rely more on your reflexes just added that something that I felt the game needed in the first few hours. It's obviously not a must to enjoy the game, but if you're comfortable enough to give it a go, I'd recommend it. So when you're not fighting, you'll be exploring, and when you're exploring, you'll be looting gear. Now gear is general clothing items that provide a boost to either your offensive or defensive stats. Most of the changes are minor, but there are so many pieces of gear throughout the world that if you love to explore, you'll be swapping stuff out constantly. Think of it as a looter shooter similar to Borderlands, where the aim is to constantly be upgrading your loadout. Granted, some of the designs are pretty hideous, but if you press square on PlayStation while in the gear menu, you can alter the appearance of an item to look like anything else you've previously acquired. It took me too long to figure this out, to the point where I was using severely underleveled gear about 5 hours in because I liked the look of the default clothes the best. Don't be like me. Use this feature. Now I tend to walk around with gloves, glasses and a scarf on, but I've altered the appearance to look like I'm not wearing them. The only issue I really have with the system is the upgrading mechanic. A little while into the game you unlock the ability to use finite items and upgrade your gear, but I never really bothered with this since I'd have to use these limited resources to improve a glove for example. But in 15 minutes time I'd likely find a better glove out in the world anyway. I think it's worth doing in the end game when you stop finding better loot, but through most of your journey I personally avoid it. So sure, not all of the game's mechanics are perfectly fleshed out, but it introduces so many of them through the main questline that it never really bothered me. It felt like you were always learning new things. It's not as if it throws 10 different concepts at you at the start with a million little tutorial pop-up windows, it gradually feeds them in. I was probably about 15 to 20 hours in before I knew that the Room of Requirement was even a thing in the game. This was incredible to me upon unlocking it, a personal room to unwind between quests that you can customize to your heart's content with different textures and colours, and the ability to freely place items of furniture wherever you like, as if you're playing The Sims. Add to that you inevitably get access to the vivariums, which allow you to rescue wild beasts in the Highlands and keep them safe here, where you can feed them, brush them, play with them, and even breed them. I had no idea this was a thing beforehand, so it felt truly magical to keep discovering intricate systems like this tens of hours into my experience. But definitely my favourite thing about Hogwarts Legacy is the absolute freedom you have to do what you want, where you want, when you want. You can go from exploring the surrounding mountains to hopping on your broom or hippogriff, flying across the sky, landing right in the middle of the Hogwarts courtyard, and then simply go through the door. No loading screens, no jarring pop-ins, just the raw capability of limitless exploration. You can weave in and out of the Forbidden Forest, circle the Quidditch pitch, or hover over the Black Lake without limitation, and then just land near Hogsmeade for a brew in the Hog's Head. That's pretty incredible. I wouldn't go as far as to say that the game is perfect though. There are a few things that I wish had been implemented to make it just that little bit more immersive. I'd have liked for the classes to be a little more involved in regard to what gameplay there is. I love thinking back to the Half-Blood Prince game where potion making was a detailed system of pouring the right ingredients and stirring and boiling the solution until it turns the right colour, which made it a little disappointing that here it was just the case of press this button to add the thing. Even in the PS1 games, when you learn a new spell, you'd have to showcase a proper demonstration of how to use it before you left the class, with weird assault courses set up for you. Here though, a teacher tells you the incarnation, and now you just know the spell and can already cast it perfectly. I suppose it is nice to keep the pace going, but I'd have preferred a progression system with the spells, so that when, for example, you learn Levioso, you begin by lifting light objects just as you're getting to terms with it, and over time, maybe tie it into the challenges in your field guide, you could get better at it and then lift heavier things. This isn't a big issue, I am looking for things to improve here, but that would have been a nice touch I think, and added more layers to the student life dynamic. Also, this one is nitpicky, but I wish you could play more mini-games around Hogwarts. Again, If I think back to the Order of the Phoenix, you get to play different versions of gobstones with other students. You could play Exploding Snap, or even compete against house champions at Wizard Chess. It would have been amazing to have that level of interaction with your peers. But let's be honest, what we got is still by far the best interpretation of this world we've ever received, and it would take a lot for another game to steal that crown. Hello everybody, thank you very much for watching. I do hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you've been playing the game, I certainly hope you've been having a fun time with that. I just want to say here quickly in the outro that if you've watched a few of my videos before, you might have noticed that I've removed my Twitter handle from my outro card. I've deleted the app because it wasn't really good for me mentally, so I've gotten shot of that, but you can still follow me over on Instagram if you want to keep up to date with what I'm doing and what videos will be coming next. And I've also added the links down below for my Letterboxd, my serialized and my backlogged accounts, so you can follow what I'm doing in regards to what movies I'm watching, what TV shows I'm watching, and what video games I'm playing, respectively. Other than that, once again, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Don't forget to leave a like if you did, subscribe for more of this stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.